Okay, so now I've got a canopy on. I'm ready to start installing some 12 volt stuff into the canopy. Before I do that, I need to upgrade the terminal connections at the starter battery. So with the Mazda BT-50, they've got this weird design. You might see it in other cars where they've got current sensing technology. So it makes it a lot more difficult to add accessories. So I've bought some Unilug 2-up terminal post adapters. It adds a battery post adapter to an extra point of connection, and then you can just attach your existing battery cables onto it without having to cut it and relug it. So I've got one for the negative terminal and there's another one for the positive terminal. They're different sizes, so you need to order one for each. Once I've done that, I'm going to add a Blue Sea Safetyhub 150 into the mix. This is going to be a distribution hub for all of the circuits coming from the front of the car. So this will feed the DC-DC charger, which will feed everything else. Could be a compressor coming off this. There could be more lights that go on later that come off the starter battery. So anything else that wants to come off the starter battery will go off this distribution hub, and all the stuff for the auxiliary battery will come off another one of these that'll be mounted in the canopy. So the reason I went for the Blue Sea Safetyhub 150 is because it has 4 points for MIDI fuses, which can go up to sort of 200 amps. So you can get a few high amperage circuits out of it. So if you're running a compressor off the starter battery, you can fuse it correctly inside here. Everything's nice and neat. It tidies up all your cabling, and then you got your negative bus bar on the other side. So all of the negatives can come back here. They don't have to go to the chassis. You got 6 ATO fuse points, and then you got 4 MIDI fuse points. So you can run some pretty high amperage stuff off this distribution hub, as well as your low amperage stuff. I won't be doing that today though. I'll just be trying to get this into the car and just get a feed supply to it. Okay, so we're just going to briefly touch on cable sizing. In the automotive industry, it's a bit backwards. It makes no sense at all. Instead of using millimeters square, which is logical, it means something, it represents an actual value in size. They use mostly BNS, which is also American wire gauge. So you'll find a lot of different weird numbers. There are heaps of conversion charts on the internet. Unfortunately, some of the conversion charts are wrong. They're never wrong by a lot, but they do differ slightly. The most common one I found is this one, which I found this to be the most frequently used conversion chart, with the sizes being the most accurate. So as far as selecting the right size cable goes, in this instance today, we're not going to consider voltage drop because we're running such a short cable from the battery to the Blue Sea Safetyhub 150. Voltage drop is not going to be an issue. Both the negative and the active cables will be less than 300 or 400 mil in length. So all we're worried about is the current carrying capacity. So where it gets more confusing is that everybody has different CCCs, current carrying capacities, for the different size cables. What I'd recommend is that if you can find the manufacturer of the cable, go off their table, but keep in mind that you want to add a safety factor in, because a lot of the time they'll advertise the maximum CCC, whereas you don't want to go anywhere near the maximum CCC. Now, as far as knowing how much amperage you'll need, that is impossible to say because it's on a case-by-case basis. What you have to do is add up everything that will be supplied by this cable downstream, and you'll have to have something that can, in theory, supply all of those loads if they were all to be used at the same time with a safety factor built into it. In my case, I've got this, which is 0 AWG. I'll just show you one more thing. This is where it gets even more confusing. So JCar website, it shows this, their largest cable, as being 44 mil squared, which is 1 AWG, but 1/0 AWG is 0 AWG. 2/0 AWG is 00 AWG. 3/0 AWG is 000 AWG. So this is not 1 AWG, it is 1/0, 10, 0 BNS or 0 AWG. This is 53 mil squared. This will not fit in a 50 mil squared lug, which is the largest lug that JCar sell. So they're selling a cable that does not fit in the largest lug that they sell, and they have the current carrying capacity on their website to suit a 44 mil squared cable. Regardless, this is more than enough for me. This can handle probably in excess of 250 amps. So the reason your CCC ratings will change is because cables can have a different amount of conductors. They can be made of different quality materials and all this sort of stuff. So all you're really looking for is a rough guide to make sure that your cable is going to be safe, that it can handle all of the loads at once. But there's another thing that will keep your cable safe, and that is a fuse. So every positive should have a fuse in it, as close as possible to the power supply. Often these fuses are in, like we're installing today, the Blue Sea Safetyhub 150, you just connect everything to your fuse box and then that fuse is protecting it. But in some cases with these large cables, you need to connect another fuse, an inline fuse. Now the larger fuse you need, the different type of fuse you'll need as well. So you have MIDIs and ANLs, and you have ATO, ATCs. There's different styles of fuses for what amperage you're trying to accomplish. So I've gone with an ANL fuse, 150 amp. The reason I went for that is because that's the size I need to supply the DC-DC charger, possibly a hardwired compressor one day, which could draw up to 69 amps. DC-DC charger can draw up to 50 amps. Floodlights, at the moment, they're about 15 amp. So all these things you sort of add up. If you're going to add another light bar later or something like that, there's more amperage that'll be coming off that fuse. So the theory when selecting your cable and your fuses is the combined amperage draw of all of your loads, if they were all to be used at once, should be less than your fuse rating, because you don't want the fuse to blow all the time. And then the current carrying capacity of the cable should be higher than what the fuse is rated at. You don't want these changes to be marginal. If you have a total load of 60 amp, then you want your fuses to be 80 to 100 amp. You don't want a 60 amp fuse, and you don't want a cable with a 65 amp current carrying capacity. You may as well choose a cable that can take over 100 amps. The bigger the better, as long as you can terminate it correctly into what you're fitting it into. So that's basically it with cable and fuse selection. What I recommend is you write everything down from start to finish. Try and think ahead, things you won't have for a long time, even if you don't plan on buying something for another year or so. If you are fairly confident that you're going to get it one day, write it down and calculate that into your cable sizing. The last thing you want to do is go and change these later. So I went through and thought of everything I might need, and then I wrote it all down on a piece of paper. I even drew it out to give myself a rough circuit guide, and then I did a final copy with a list to go down to the shops to buy it that way. And then I could cross it off one at a time, knowing that when I came back I had everything, plus I doubled up all my fuses just so I had at least one spare of each fuse size that I was going to use in the circuit. Alright, that's it for cable selection and fuse selection, so now we get back into the install. First part of this job will be these two Unilug battery post adapters. That's just to upgrade the battery terminals. After that we'll be installing a Blue Sea Safetyhub 150. So this was the ideal one for me, even though it is a little bit larger. I've got some lugs here. The reason I've got 6 is because I'm taking the active, even though it's a very short run, through a fuse, just to keep everything safe. You just need some basic sockets for battery terminals and stuff, heat shrink to go over the lugs. Here's a crimping tool, cable cutting tool, and a gas torch to do up the heat shrink. And in the middle here, I've got some sticky back Velcro fittings. Outside of everything here, there might be a little bit of corrugated tubing that I use, and just some general hand tools and snips and stuff to cut up heat shrink. That's basically it for this battery upgrade and distribution hub install. So I've just jammed everything in this box here. Just going to weigh it so we can see how much weight we've added to the car. At the moment we've got 2.917 on the scales, and then we'll just weigh whatever doesn't get installed at the end, and the difference will be what we've added to the car. So your car might have something similar to this, where the terminal gives no options to add additional accessories to it, but you can't really get rid of it because it's sort of an inline crimp that heads elsewhere. So I've removed the positive terminal cover just so we can get a look at what's under there. Some of this wiring is all existing. I haven't traced it out yet, but it goes to the spotties. So one day I'll tidy that up, but that's not the objective for today. You can see with the design of these batteries that it's kind of awkward just to try and chop it and change it to your own battery terminal. Because they got all this current sensors and voltage sensors and stuff built into it, it makes it a little bit awkward to add your own accessories, especially on the negative here. What we're going to do is, using the Unilug 2-up, we get a new post to connect this clamp on, then we get an extra post for our accessories to connect to. Stage 1 will be connecting the Unilug. Before I start playing around with anything, I'm just going to disconnect the negative terminal so we don't have any shorts or anything like that, and I'll use a plastic bag just to make sure it doesn't accidentally connect itself again. So you can see the positive terminal there, that's all done. This here on the bottom is now the Unilug, and this is the factory arrangement. I'll use this spare terminal to feed the Blue Sea Safety 150, and the negative I've done as well, but I've still got the battery disconnected just because I'm still working with the cabling, and I don't want anything to be connected again until the cabling is finished. So as you can see, the engine bay around the battery, there's not a lot of space that will actually sit lower than the bonnet, and the further forward you get, the less height you actually have between the bonnet and the internal components. The one space you do have is over here. Now I've taken this up with a catch can and a pre-fuel filter, so the free space in the Ranger and the BT-50 is normally here. I've already taken it. To keep the cable run short and keep all the electrical in the same sort of area, I'm going to mount it to the fuse box lid. Now obviously you still want to get access to the fuse box itself, so I want to mount it in a way that I can still get the fuse box lid out to change any fuses. Now the problem with this is these relays and some of these taller fuses, they actually come right up to the bottom of the lid, so I can't really nut and bolt anything. There's no clearance between the top of the lid and the underside. So the plan is to use sticky back Velcro here. I'll clean it with isopropyl alcohol. This mounted here somewhere in a way that it can still lift it and hopefully get it out of the way and still get the fuse box lid off. And the other thing I'll have to do is mount this fuse holder. This is the general idea at the moment, is that a cable will come off here, go through the fuse holder, and then it can run off this side of the fuse holder to here with enough of a loop here that this lid will still lift off. With the negative buzz bar, I can either run a negative off here or I can run one just piggyback on this bolt here. So that's the plan at the moment. We'll just see how well it sticks. There shouldn't be a lot of pressure on this anyway, so the sticky back Velcro should be more than enough to hold this down. It's not actually Velcro, but it is a hook and loop sort of style. It clicks together. With the back of the Blue Sea Safetyhub and the fuse holder, you don't actually get a smooth surface, but I'm going to give it a shot, and if they start coming off, then I'm actually going to try and glue the sticky back to here. I'll see how we go first, just relying on the stickiness, and it's going to have the cables supporting it once they're connected as well. I'm going to stick it down in this arrangement here, so the positive is next to the positive terminal, and the negative buzz bar is next to this chassis mount and the negative terminal. Fuse holder, I'm just going to stick down on that side, just to allow a nice bend in and out. So I've left both of these for a couple of minutes now, putting pressure down, just to hope they stick as well as they can. So I'm not going to put any fuses in yet, because I've still got to wire the back and everything, so I'll leave the fuses out until I'm all ready to go. That'll keep everything safe. That way, with this fuse out, I'll be able to connect things to here without any danger of shorting something out while I'm working on it. So here's the cable size. You can see it's high flex, lots of strands, but it's basically 0 AWG on the JCar website. It says that this is 44mm, but it's definitely not. It's not even close to fitting in a 50mm square lug. So what I've done is gone and bought some 70x8s, and it fits in a lot better now. But in the crimping tool, I'm crimping it at 50mm. I think the cable is probably just over 50mm, maybe closer to 55. But it fits in here just, and then I'll crimp it at 50mm to get a nice secure crimp on it, crimp it 3 times. So there's plenty of tools you can use to strip these cables. With this flex cable, it's got thousands of strands. You just want to be careful not to go through too far. These are good for hard drawn cable, but with flex, I think it's easier to go through with one of these or a Stanley knife and get the insulation cut perfectly without nicking any strands off. This is my preference because it's easier. Stanley knife works fine as well. This, it can be done, you just got to be more careful, because if you ring a bit too deep, then you'll cut strands off. So before you make the cut, just sort of measure out where you think roughly your cable's going to be. This cable is very flexible, it's multi-stranded, very thin strands, so you get a bit of leeway even though it's a bigger cable. If you want to put any conduit on, do it before you lug, because the lugs, depending on the size, won't fit through that conduit. If you've got split conduit, then it doesn't matter because you can just slide it over, but this is sealed conduit. When you're stripping your cables, make sure that the copper comes right up to the end here. Now we can crimp it. When we crimp it, we want to crimp it in an orientation. Even though this is flexible and it will twist, the shorter the length, the harder it'll be to twist. So we want to crimp this how we want it to sit in the engine bay. So you might have one like that and the other one on the other side like that, depending on your cable run. You just want to crimp it so it suits the engine bay. Crimp 3 times. You can file these little edges off to make it smooth. Put your heat shrink on. when you put your heat shrink on, you don't want to cover this flat surface, that's your contact surface, so don't push it up like that. Just back it off a bit. Have it about there so you're not covering this contact surface on the bottom, and shrink that down. First I'll just file off these rough edges, and I'll do the same with the black, and once everything's in I'll show you what it all looks like inside the car. I've had to do the battery to the A&L fuse holder twice. The first one was the length that I thought it would work. It didn't actually work, and the reason being is because with these awkward terminals from the Mazda BT-50, these existing ones here, you can see this edge here has to drop down below this clamp, so it has to be angled in certain directions, and then you lose clearances here and it messes everything up. So I had to sort of rearrange everything a few times, and in the end, by the time I rearranged it all, the cable wasn't quite how I wanted it to go. Because of this post being recessed in here, the way that I thought it was going to go, it wouldn't actually lay flat, the lug. So I've had to do a longer piece, curve it around, and it's all protected. Obviously it's fused anyway, but it's protected in this is Corrie, but it's non-split. It's never going to come off, it's nice and sturdy. Heat shrink over the lugs, and that should be good to go. Random fuses here, and another one in here. I'm going to tidy all them up, have everything coming off here. Now on the other side, because I wanted to protect everything in Corrie, you lose a lot of your flexibility. This cable is pretty flexible. With all the flexibility that you lose with the Corrie, I've actually just looped it around. So it's still short, it's only about 250mm. Just looped it around the back of the catch can there. Going on to the positive here. Here's a look at the final product with all the covers off. I might just play around with these, try and get these to sit a bit more flush. So from the battery, no fuse at the moment, goes into there. That cover on there, this just loops around the back of the catch can onto here. And then for the neutral side, I've just gone under here and up onto here. These are some of the worst battery terminals to modify. These clamps here, these P clamps or whatever they're called, they're just horrible. Like even trying to get this edge past here, I had to hit it with a rubber mallet just to try and get it past. Everything just seems to be a couple mil too big and really awkward to do anything with. Now we have our Safetyhub 150 here, and I'll be able to label up those circuits once they're finalised. I'm not going to label these until I'm happy with the final circuit arrangement. I've just got some covers to put on here and here. It's basically how it's going to sit. In here you can put your 4 MIDI fuses. I'm going to put a compressor off one, another one will run to the DC-DC charger in the canopy, and then I'll have 2 spares for now unless I think of another reason for them. And then over on this side you got your 6 MIDI fuses. That is where I'll rewire these spotties into here, just to get rid of all these inline fuses in the engine bay. So now I've got a central hub for everything that's fused. I'm going to go with a 150 amp fuse for here. This cable can hold over 200 amps, that's not an issue, but I'm not going to put it in yet until I finish the wiring in the back of the canopy. So with this arrangement I can still access the fuse box just by unclipping the A&L fuse holder. I don't actually have to get rid of the Safetyhub 150, I can leave it on the lid. These being lightweight clips, it's actually easier to unclip this. Just feed that back around the catch can. There you go, pretty happy with that. Now, on the active side there's so much going on, I've got no chance of actually getting anything on properly. Just try and place it over there and I'll cable tie that down just to provide for some protection to the positive terminals. So the Blue Sea Safetyhub 150 actually says that the M8s can be done up to 20 Newton meters. So that's the main, active and neutral done. Hopefully they never have to come back off. So all the cut-offs and rubbish are in the box, so we'll just add this up. 913 grams, so the difference between that and what we had at the start is what's added to the car. The majority of that is the cable. Now cost-wise, looking at $10 for this sticky back Velcro that I used for the A&L fuse holder. And then I think it was about $6.50 for the Velcro that I used for the actual Blue Sea Safetyhub 150. The Unilug 2-up terminals I bought off eBay because they were cheaper than anywhere else. I got them for $44. You'll find them in a few four-wheel drive shops and stuff like that, but they'll charge $55 plus for them. $193 for the Blue Sea Safetyhub 150. Now in regards to cable, each one of those was 0 AWG. That was a red and a black at 1 meter. So each meter of that is $32.95. Now the heat shrink I already had. I also used some non-split Corrie. but that price will be covered in the install of the DC-DC charger when I use up the rest of it. And I spent about $30 on lugs. They're 70 by M8, so that's 70 mil squared. They're about $5 each. I bought 6 of them because I went through the A&L fuse holder, so there's 4 for the red, 2 for the black. And that's the total cost of it. Alright, that's it with the battery terminal upgrade. So that gives me a distribution hub now so I can run outgoing circuits, have everything centralized. I've still got more work to do. There's a little bit of messing around and changing angles just to try and get everything to sit down. So it's not perfect at the moment. It's another little project. It's just a little bit of rewiring on the front there just to get everything coming through that DC hub, and then everything will be neat and centralized. That sticky back is holding really well at the moment, but we'll see how it goes with vibration, dust and the heat from the engine bay, because it'll get very hot in there. So if it starts to fail, I'll add some super glue to the back, and hopefully that'll just hold it down permanently on top of the fuse box lid. I'm really happy with the Blue Sea Safetyhub 150. I love the fact that there's 10 outputs there, 4 larger outputs and 6 smaller circuits. I love the fact that there's a neutral bus bar, so I don't have to connect anything to the chassis. Everything will have a really good connection. There's no chance of getting a bad connection by connecting to the chassis and having paint or rust or anything like that. Alright guys, hopefully that's been of some help, giving you some ideas of how you can change your battery post terminals if you've got the same design as me. Hopefully these Unilug 2-ups will help. Just be prepared to mess around a lot with the different angles, just so you can get one edge past another, drop it down onto the post terminal correctly. It took me a lot longer than I thought it would, just because of the poor design of the factory terminals from Mazda. So that's it for this one. Here's the running costs and weights and everything that we've added to the build in this episode. Oh, that's my face. That's it for the battery terminal. If that's the case, I'll add some sticky glue. Sticky glue? All glue is sticky. Giving you some I'll do it. Fuck, thank fuck that's over.